The colony world of 442b was dying. 3 weeks of constant bombardment had turned the green lands into scorched earth. The ships hung in the sky like metal vultures, circling and waiting for the final kill. Commander Victoria Hayes stood in the underground bunker and stared at the tactical screen showing the positions of enemy forces. Every red dot represented a ship or landing zone. The blue dots representing human defenses grew fewer with each passing day. Victoria had been the colony's military commander for 5 years before the invasion started. She was tall and strong, with short brown hair and eyes that had seen too much death in too short a time. She had lost friends, soldiers, and thousands of civilians. The weight of all those losses pressed down on her shoulders every single moment. The bunker was 3 levels underground, built to survive nuclear attacks. Now it served as a tomb for the last remnants of human hope on this world. Around Victoria, officers stared at screens and tried to find solutions that did not exist. There were no solutions. The Galactic Council had ignored their calls for help. The nearest human colony was 15 light-years away. Nobody was coming to save them. Ensign Aaron Mitchell sat at the communications station. He was only 19 years old, the youngest officer in the bunker. His hands shook as he monitored the failing systems. 3 days ago, he had watched a civilian transport ship get shot down. 200 people had died in that ship. He still heard their screams in his head when he tried to sleep. Victoria walked over to Aaron and placed a hand on his shoulder. The young ensign looked up at her with fear in his eyes. She wanted to tell him that everything would be okay. She wanted to lie to him like all the other officers were lying to themselves. But Victoria had learned long ago that lies were the thing you could give a dying person. They deserved truth, even if the truth was brutal. "How much time do we have?" Victoria asked. Aaron checked his instruments. The screens showed landing craft preparing for deployment. The enemy had decided that enough damage had been done. Now they wanted to take the planet intact and begin resource extraction. The colony's resources were valuable. They did not want to destroy everything. They just wanted the humans gone. "Maybe 6 hours," Aaron said. "Maybe less. Their ground forces are mobilizing. They are moving toward the main settlements." Victoria nodded. 6 hours. In 6 hours, they would land their soldiers and begin the systematic conquest of the colony. Resistance would be pointless. The human military had been destroyed in the first week of the invasion. The remaining soldiers and civilians were exhausted, hungry, and running low on ammunition. Victoria made a decision. It was a decision born from desperation, but it was the only decision left to make. She walked to the main communications console and activated the colony-wide broadcast system. Her voice echoed through the bunker and into every shelter, every hiding place where colonists had gathered. "This is Commander Hayes," she said. "I am about to send a final distress signal. We will not give up. We will not surrender. We will fight until the last moment. For those who can still hold a weapon, meet at the secondary base in 1 hour. For those who cannot fight, stay hidden and stay alive. This is not over." She ended the broadcast and turned to Aaron. The young ensign was already preparing the distress beacon. The signal would travel through space at the speed of light, reaching outward into the darkness. The probability that anyone would receive it was almost zero. The probability that anyone would come to help was even lower. The Galactic Council had made their position clear. Humanity was too new, too weak, too aggressive. They would not risk their own forces to save humans. But Victoria had to try. She had to believe that somewhere out there someone was listening, someone who gave a damn about human lives. "Send it," Victoria commanded. "Send it to all frequencies, send it everywhere." Aaron activated the beacon. The message went out into the void of space, a bottle thrown into an endless ocean. It contained everything: the colony's coordinates, the number of survivors, the weapon's status, the force composition, everything. It was a final cry for help from people who had been abandoned by the galaxy. In the tactical center, officers continued to work. Lieutenant Colonel Price was studying the landing patterns. He was trying to find some weakness, some angle of attack that might work. But the math was always the same. 2,000 human soldiers against 50,000 troops. The humans could not win. They could only choose how they wanted to die. The screens showed civilian zones being evacuated. Families were being moved to the deepest shelters. Children who had been born on this world, children who had never seen Earth, were being sent underground. Victoria wondered if they would ever see the sky again. She wondered if the species would survive at all. An officer approached Victoria with a report. The commander had sent a final message. It was a standard invasion transmission, offering the colony the choice of immediate surrender or complete annihilation. The message was cold and clinical. This was just business. Planets were conquered every day across the galaxy. This planet was no different. Victoria read the message and threw it aside. There would be no surrender. Humans did not surrender when their homes were being invaded. That was not who they were. That was not what they did. She walked to the small window that looked out across the damaged landscape. The sky was filled with enemy ships. The ground was scorched and broken. The colony that 50,000 people had built was being destroyed in real time. But in that moment, Victoria made a vow to herself. Humans would not be forgotten. Humans would not be erased. Even if she died, even if all of them died, humanity would be remembered as a people who fought back. Aaron called out from the communications station. "Signal sent, Commander. We are broadcasting to Admiral Gregory Stone stood on the bridge of the human cruiser Valiant. He was a man in his 60s with gray hair and a face that had been carved by decades of military service. His uniform bore the insignia of the highest rank in the Earth Defense Fleet. Stone had commanded human forces for over 30 years, and he had learned one fundamental truth about warfare. Speed and aggression were the only real advantages humans possessed. The bridge crew worked in controlled chaos. Navigation officers calculated intercept courses, while weapons systems specialists ran diagnostics on all available armaments. The Valiant was the flagship of a strike group consisting of 5 heavy cruisers, 12 fast attack fighters, and 4 support vessels. The total crew numbered approximately 4,000 soldiers, pilots, engineers, and support personnel. Captain Jennifer entered the bridge. She was the commander of the fighter squadron and one of the finest pilots in the human fleet. At 42 years old, had seen combat in 3 different star systems. She had lost friends in every one of them. Her dark eyes scanned the tactical displays with professional appreciation. "Admiral, all fighter squadrons report ready status," reported. "We can be in the launch bay within 15 minutes if needed." Stone nodded slowly. He was watching the formations on the main display. The aliens had been conducting routine patrols in this sector for weeks. Stone's fleet had been tracking them, studying their tactics, learning their weaknesses. They were technologically superior. There was no denying that fact, but technology was not everything. Stone had learned long ago that humans had an advantage that no amount of technology could overcome. Humans were willing to die for their people. The conquered worlds for profit and power. Humans would fight to protect their own. That difference in motivation changed everything. "Alert all ship captains," Stone commanded. "We are changing course immediately. Set intercept vector for 442B. Maximum velocity. I want to be there in 8 days." Lieutenant Colonel Price stood at the tactical station. He had been Stone's tactical officer for 12 years. Price was a man of precise calculations and cold logic. He had already run the numbers. The human fleet could reach 442B in 8 days and 17 hours at maximum acceleration. They would not expect them to come at all. "The fleet is 3 times our size, sir," Price said, stating facts without emotion. "Our ships have older technology. We will have numerical disadvantage in every category." Stone turned to look at his tactical officer. There was no fear in Price's voice. There was no hesitation, just facts and readiness for whatever came next. "Then we will have to be smarter than they are," Stone said. "Send a response to the colony. Tell them we are coming. Tell them to hold their position and maintain defensive posture. And tell them not to give up." The message was broadcast across the void of space. It took 3 hours for the signal to reach 442B. Stone imagined what the colonists were feeling when they received it. He imagined their relief, their desperate hope that humanity would actually come to save them. The fleet accelerated toward the distant star system. The acceleration was brutal, pressing every crew member back into their seats with multiple times Earth's normal gravity. The human body was built for this kind of stress. On the other hand, had relied on gravity compensation technology for so long that they had forgotten how to handle real physical force. That was another human advantage. Humans were tougher. Humans could survive things that would kill most other species. Stone gathered his senior staff in the briefing room. Besides and Price, there was Major Daniel Cross, the commander of the Ground Forces Division. Cross was a tactical genius who had studied every conflict recorded in human military history. He had a way of understanding the enemy's mind and predicting their next move. "They are expecting a formal battle," Cross explained, pointing to holographic displays of the colony world and the surrounding space. They are expecting us to engage their fleet in open combat. They have the advantage there. Bigger ships, better weapons, more soldiers. If we play their game, we lose. So we do not play their game, Stone said. It was a statement, not a question. No, sir, Cross replied. We play our game. We use speed, deception, and ruthlessness. We hit them where they are not prepared. We do not fight the battle they want to fight. We fight the battle that gives us the best chance to win. Captain leaned forward. That means we will take casualties, probably more than we can afford. Yes, Stone agreed. We will take casualties. Good soldiers will die. But if we do nothing, the entire colony dies. All 50,000 people. That is not acceptable. Not on my watch. Not while I command this fleet. The briefing room was silent. Every officer understood what Stone was saying. They understood that they were going to fight an enemy superior in numbers and technology. They understood that some of them would not come home. But they also understood that humans did not abandon their own. That was the human way. That was what separated humans from every other species in the galaxy. We attack in 3 coordinated waves, Price outlined the plan. First wave, we send our fastest ships and fighters to harass their outer defenses. We want them to think we are weaker than we actually are. We want them to underestimate us. Second wave asked. Second wave involves our heavier ships and ground forces, Price continued. We press the advantage created by the first wave. We push them back and establish landing zones near the colony. And the third wave? Cross asked. Victoria stood in the command center and watched the tactical display. The forces were consolidating their positions across the planet. Ground troops were establishing forward bases. Air support craft were patrolling the skies, hunting for any human resistance. 8 days had passed since the distress signal was sent. 8 days of waiting, of fighting small skirmishes, of losing ground meter by meter. But 8 days also meant that the human fleet was getting closer. Victoria had organized the remaining military personnel into resistance cells. They had taken weapons from destroyed outposts and distributed them to civilians who could fight. The colony now had approximately 2,000 armed defenders. It was not much against 50,000 soldiers, but it was something. It was enough to cause problems. It was enough to make the invasion costly. Ensign Aaron Mitchell had recovered from his wounds. The infection had cleared and the pain had become manageable. He had volunteered for an infiltration mission, a plan so dangerous that Victoria had almost refused to authorize it. But Aaron insisted. He wanted to contribute. He wanted to help save his home. The mission was simple in concept, but deadly in execution. Aaron and 5 soldiers would penetrate deep into territory, reach their main communications relay, and destroy it. Without communications, the forces would be fragmented and unable to coordinate their movements. Even a few hours of communication blackout could mean the difference between victory and defeat. Aaron suited up in dark tactical gear. His equipment was sparse and simple. They had advanced sensors, so humans had learned to use low-tech approaches whenever possible. They had weapons made of materials that did not show up on electronic scanners. They had camouflage made from natural fibers. They had learned to fight like ghosts in the machine. The 5 other soldiers were all veterans. Lieutenant Foster was the squad leader, a man in his 40s with scars on his face and arms from previous combat. Sergeant Shaw was a demolitions expert. Corporal Tom Hayes was a communications specialist. Private was the team medic. Private David was point man and scout. They moved through the darkness with purpose and precision. Every soldier understood that capture meant death. They did not take prisoners. They did not believe in mercy or compassion. They simply eliminated threats and moved on. The communications relay was located on a high mountain ridge, approximately 15 kilometers from the nearest base camp. The team moved through the night, using the terrain to their advantage. Humans were excellent at moving quietly through difficult ground. They had evolved on a harsh world that demanded stealth and cunning. David led the way, moving ahead to scout for enemy positions. His eyes were adjusted to the darkness. His ears were attuned to every sound. Behind him, the rest of the team followed in single file, each soldier maintaining proper spacing and maintaining awareness of their surroundings. They reached the relay station just before dawn. The structure was well guarded, with soldiers positioned at 4 corners and a heavy weapons emplacement on the roof. The humans were outnumbered but they had surprise on their side. They did not expect anyone to attack such a well-defended position. Foster gave the signal. Sergeant Shaw moved forward with her demolition pack. The other soldiers provided covering fire, their weapons clicking and popping in the pre-dawn darkness. The soldiers responded with heavy weapon fire, their advanced weapons lighting up the sky with energy bursts. Aaron ran toward the relay station. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking. This was his first real combat. He had trained for years, but training never prepared you for the reality of people trying to kill you. He threw himself through a window and into the relay station. Inside, communications officers were trying to send emergency distress signals. Aaron shot them before they could complete the transmissions. Outside, the firefight raged. Tom Hayes was hit by enemy fire and went down, moved to help him while covering behind a large rock. David maintained suppressive fire as Sergeant Shaw reached the main communications array and set charges. The demolition charges were shaped to destroy the equipment without causing a full building collapse. Shaw was an artist with explosives. The charges detonated with precision. The communications equipment exploded in a shower of sparks and metal fragments. The soldiers began a tactical retreat, falling back toward the military base to call for reinforcements. It was exactly what it anticipated. "Move, move, move," shouted the team, carrying the wounded Tom Hayes between them. It was a running firefight through difficult terrain with the pressing them hard. But the humans were running toward their own territory, toward places where they knew the human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the 442B system. Admiral Stone's ships appeared on the sensors like ghosts materializing in the darkness. For a moment, there was confusion. The commanders had not expected reinforcements to arrive. They had assumed the colony was completely isolated and abandoned. Admiral Stone did not give the enemy time to react. He ordered immediate strikes on all identified positions. The human fleet's weapon systems lit up the darkness. Energy beams and kinetic missiles screamed through space toward their targets. The first defense platform exploded in a burst of radiation and metal shrapnel. Captain Jennifer led her fighter squadrons into battle. Her hands moved across the control panel with practiced precision. The small human fighter craft were not designed to be superior to fighters, but they were more maneuverable. The human pilots were willing to take risks that pilots would consider insane. Flew her fighter straight into a formation, forcing them to take evasive action. Her wingman fired on 2 enemy craft whilst guns targeted a third. The battles in space were brutal and chaotic. Ships collided with asteroids. Fighters spiraled out of control after taking direct hits. The vacuum of space became filled with debris and wreckage. Human pilots were dying, soldiers were dying, but the human fleet was not retreating. Lieutenant Colonel Price coordinated all the attacks from the tactical station on the Valiant. His fingers flew across the holographic displays, redirecting firepower, coordinating strikes, managing the complex flow of battle. It was like conducting an orchestra, with warships and fighter craft as his instruments. On the planet below, Commander Victoria Hayes watched the sky light up with weapons fire. The human fleet was attacking. After 3 weeks of total defeat and slow death, the humans were finally fighting back. She stood in the command center and gave the order for her ground forces to attack. Major Daniel Cross led the commando team toward the command ship that had landed near the destroyed settlement of New Haven. The command ship was large and well-protected, surrounded by fortifications and guard posts. Cross and his team of 40 elite soldiers had to fight through 3 layers of defensive positions to even get close. The first position fell after 30 minutes of intense combat. They were tough fighters, but they relied on their advanced weapons to win. When the human soldiers got close enough, the advantages of technology disappeared. Close quarters combat favored humans. Human strength and human ferocity were devastating when deployed in tight spaces. Corporal threw explosive charges through a window of a guard tower. The explosion brought the entire structure crashing down. Sergeant Vincent Park used his combat knife to disable 2 soldiers in quick succession. The human soldiers moved like predators, pressing their advantage, never giving the time to fall back and regroup. The second position was harder. They had dug in and prepared fixed defensive lines. Energy weapons swept across the terrain, cutting down human soldiers. 3 soldiers fell with catastrophic injuries. 5 more were wounded but continued fighting. The humans did not retreat. They did not hesitate. They pressed forward, using suppressive fire from multiple angles to break the defensive position. And then the second line fell, and the path to the command ship was open. Cross led his team up the loading ramp of the massive vessel. The interior was a maze of corridors and chambers. Every turn brought new resistance. The humans moved through the command ship like ghosts, like shadows made of fury and determination. They were outnumbered, but they did not care. They had trained for this. They were built for this. Cross reached the command center. He and his team fought their way past the final defensive positions. The commander, a creature of pale blue skin and 8 limbs, tried to escape. Cross cut off its path and engaged it in direct combat. The alien was stronger and faster, but Cross was more experienced. He knew exactly where to strike to disable his opponent. The fell, disabled but not killed. Cross left soldiers to guard the alien and began disabling the critical systems. The main communications array was disabled. The power generator was sabotaged. The command ship became dark and silent, its systems failing one by one. The forces on the planet lost their coordination and command structure. Without clear orders, without unified command, they began to fracture. On the mountain where Victoria had established her main defensive position, the human commander watched as the army started to fall apart. Soldiers who had been well coordinated and disciplined began to show signs of panic and confusion. Victoria ordered her forces to advance, pushing forward and taking advantage of every moment of disorganization. In space, Admiral Stone's fleet continued to press its advantage. More ships were destroyed. Defense platforms fell. The blockade that had suffocated the colony for 3 weeks was broken. Human fighters patrolled the skies, ensuring that no enemy vessel could escape or bring reinforcements. Captain Jennifer's fighter locked onto a command vessel. She flew her craft in a direct attack vector, closing distance at an impossible speed. At the last moment, she fired her full weapons load at point-blank range. The ship exploded in a spectacular burst of energy, pulled her fighter away from the debris and targeted the next enemy vessel. The battle raged for 8 hours. 8 hours of continuous combat, death, and desperate struggle. When it was finally over, the fleet had been destroyed or forced to retreat. The blockade was broken. The invasion had failed. The colony was saved. But the cost had been terrible. Over 400 human soldiers were dead. 8 fighter pilots had been killed in action. The colony had lost another 5,000 civilians in the final battles. The army had suffered far greater losses, but loss was loss, and every death was a wound that would never fully heal. Ensign Aaron Mitchell stood on the surface of 442B and watched the human fleet position itself in protective orbit around the planet. He saw the battle-damaged ships being repaired in space. He saw the wounded soldiers being transported to medical facilities. He saw the survivors emerging from their shelters, alive and amazed that they had actually survived. Commander Victoria Hayes met with Admiral Stone in a command tent erected near the old settlement. Stone was tall and confident, his uniform bearing the marks of combat stress, but his eyes steady and certain. Victoria reached out and gripped the Admiral's hand in a formal gesture of respect and gratitude. "Thank you," Victoria said. "You saved us." The medical centers were filled with wounded soldiers and civilians. Doctors worked around the clock, performing surgeries and treating injuries. Some soldiers would recover, some would not. The human body was resilient, but there were limits to what even human physiology could endure. Ensign Aaron Mitchell lay in a medical bed with fresh bandages covering wounds from shrapnel and energy weapons. A doctor examined his shoulder and nodded with satisfaction. "You will recover fully," the doctor said. "You are young and strong. Your body is healing well." Captain Jennifer visited Aaron the next day. She was still wearing her flight suit, having come directly from the Flight Operations Center. Pilot exhaustion showed on her face, but her eyes were clear and focused. "Your infiltration team did good work," said, sitting beside the ensign's bed. "The intelligence you gathered gave us the advantage we needed. A lot of people owe their lives to what you did." Aaron looked at the captain with a mixture of pride and sadness. "Private was killed during the withdrawal," he said quietly. "And Corporal Hayes lost his left arm. Tom Hayes is still in critical condition." Nodded, she had seen the casualty reports. She knew every name of every pilot and soldier who had died in the battle. She would carry those names with her for the rest of her life. That was the price of being a soldier. That was the cost of defending the weak against the strong. "Their sacrifice will be remembered," said. "Humanity will remember what they did. The colony will remember. That has to be enough." Commander Victoria Hayes stood with Admiral Stone and studied the damage reports from across the colony. The numbers were staggering. 90% of the infrastructure had been destroyed. The main city was in ruins. The agricultural zones were contaminated. The colony would need to rebuild everything, and that would take years. But the people had survived. 50,000 people had been reduced to 35,000, but they were alive. They had not been completely annihilated. They had failed to conquer the world. The invasion had failed. "The Galactic Council has sent a message," Stone said, holding up a data pad. "They are shocked that we defeated the collective. They are requesting diplomatic communications." Victoria took the data pad and read the message. The words were careful and measured. The Council was trying to assess the threat that humanity represented. Before, humans had been irrelevant. Now, humans had defeated a major galactic power in direct combat. That changed everything. "How do you wish to respond, Admiral?" Victoria asked. Stone took the data pad back and composed a message. His response was brief and clear. "The Galactic Council should understand that humanity does not accept abandonment. Humanity does not forgive those who refuse to help when help was requested. Any future cooperation will be on human terms. Humanity is now a galactic force that must be respected." The message was sent across space to the Galactic Council. It was a declaration. It was a warning. It was a statement that the galaxy had changed. Humanity had arrived, and humanity was not going to be ignored or dismissed. Major Daniel Cross met with his soldiers in a large gathering tent. The commando team that had assaulted the command ship was being recognized for their bravery and sacrifice. Cross looked at the faces of the survivors. Some were missing limbs. Some had scars that would never fade, but their eyes showed pride and determination. "You accomplished something that seemed impossible," Cross told them. "You showed the galaxy that humans do not surrender. You showed them that we do not break under pressure. You proved that human courage and human determination can overcome any obstacle. I am proud to have served alongside each of you." The soldiers stood at attention and saluted their commander. The gesture was simple but powerful. It was recognition that they had done something that mattered. They had saved a colony. They had changed the course of human history. 7 days after the final battle, the ceremony of remembrance was held. All the soldiers and civilians who had died were honored. Their names were spoken aloud so that the colony would never forget them. Their families received recognition and support. The human survivors understood that victory always came with a price, and that price was paid in the blood of the fallen. Admiral Stone stood at the memorial and placed his hand on a stone wall. Carved into that wall were the names of 347 human soldiers who had died in the battle. Stone knew that those names would echo through human history. They had done something great. They had done something that would be remembered for generations to come. Ensign Aaron Mitchell stood beside the Admiral. The young ensign was still healing, still struggling with the memories of the infiltration mission, still hearing the sounds of combat and death in his head. But he also understood something important. He understood that humans were capable of great courage when it mattered. He understood that humans would fight for each other no matter what obstacles stood in their way. "Will we ever face them again?" Aaron asked, looking at the memorial wall. "Yes," Stone answered. "The collective will return. Other enemies will come. There will be more battles and more bloodshed. That is the way of the galaxy. But the next time the galaxy will know that humans are not easy targets. They will know that we do not surrender. They will know that we protect our own." The Admiral turned away from the memorial and looked out at the colony that had been saved. Reconstruction had already begun. Workers were clearing debris and beginning to repair damage. Families were emerging from shelters and starting to rebuild their lives. The colony would survive. It would recover. It would grow stronger. In the depths of space, the human fleet began repairs. Damaged ships were being restored to full operational status. Supplies were being redistributed. The fleet was preparing for the long journey back to human space. But before they left, they would establish a permanent defensive base near 442B. Humans would maintain a presence in this sector. Humanity would not abandon its people again. The invasion had ended. The salvation had come. The galaxy had changed. And humanity had proven that it belonged among the stars, not as victims or refugees, but as warriors and protectors. The age of human insignificance was over. The age of human power had begun. Stone nodded slowly. Humans protect humans, that is what we do, that is who we are. They did not understand that. They thought they could attack our people without consequence. They were wrong. He ground and had prepared defensive positions. They reached a hidden base camp, a small compound concealed in dense forest. Medical personnel rushed out to help with Tom Hayes. The soldier was bleeding heavily, but field medicine had kept him alive long enough. The doctors took him into surgery while the rest of the team collapsed, exhausted and adrenaline-shocked. Back on the human cruiser Valiant, Admiral Stone received the intelligence data that the infiltration team had gathered before destroying the relay station. The information was invaluable. It showed the exact positions of forces, their supply lines, their command structure, and their defensive arrangements. With this intelligence, Stone could formulate a winning strategy. Major Daniel Cross studied the data with intense concentration. A smile crossed his face as he understood what he was seeing. The forces were not as well coordinated as they appeared. They had weaknesses, they had gaps, they had vulnerabilities. "We can do this," Cross said quietly. "We can actually win this fight." On the planet below, Victoria received a message from the approaching human fleet. The message contained tactical recommendations based on the intelligence that Aaron's team had risked their lives to gather. The colony defenders would launch coordinated attacks on positions in 3 different locations. The human fleet would arrive and attack from orbit. If everything went perfectly, if every soldier did their duty, if luck smiled on them, they might actually achieve victory. Victoria looked at the faces of the soldiers and civilians around her. Some were afraid, some were determined. All of them were ready to fight for their world, for their families, for their homes. They were humans. Humans did not give up. Humans did not surrender when victory was possible. The countdown had begun. In less than 24 hours, the final battle would start. In less than 24 hours, the colony would either be saved or destroyed completely. "The third wave is us striking directly at their command structure," Price said. "We take out their leadership, their communication, their ability to coordinate. A fleet without command is just scattered metal." Stone stood up and placed his hands on the table. His officers waited for him to speak. The admiral looked at each of them in turn. These were the best soldiers the human military had produced. They were trained, experienced, and absolutely committed to the mission. "We leave for 442B today," Stone said. "We will save that colony. We will show the galaxy what humans are capable of. We will show them that you do not attack humans without consequences. Are we clear?" "Yes, sir," all the officers responded together. The human fleet began its journey across the darkness of space. 8 days stood between them and the colony. 8 days to prepare, to plan, to ready weapons and sharpen strategies. 8 days for them to continue their invasion, unaware that a force of human warriors was heading toward them at maximum speed. The shadows were stirring. Humanity was answering the call, and the galaxy was about to learn what it meant to face people who refused to die. "All frequencies. If anyone is listening, they will hear us now." Victoria turned from the window. The bunker was quiet. Everyone was waiting for death. Everyone was prepared for the end. But in that moment, something changed. A small light appeared on one of the screens. A single data transmission was coming through the interference and the jamming. Someone had received the message. Someone was responding. The message was brief and clear. "Human Colony 442B, this is Admiral Gregory Stone commanding the Earth Defense Fleet. We received your distress signal. Help is coming. Maintain your position. We will be there in 8 days. Stay alive." The bunker erupted. Officers shouted. Soldiers cheered. For the first time in 3 weeks, hope returned to the compound. Humans were coming, real humans with real weapons. The cavalry was riding in from the shadows. Victoria looked at Aaron and smiled. The young ensign had tears in his eyes. Tears of relief, of hope, of the sudden possibility that they might actually survive this nightmare. The fight was not over. In fact, the real fight was just beginning.